let's bring in the activist who led the original Brexit legal challenge, Gina Miller, and also the Guido Fawkes reporter, star of BBC Question Time, Tom Harwood. Well, like you, of course, Gina Miller as well, are also star, two stars. Now, what do you make of these latest legal efforts to hold up the process?
So I've launched the legal process by sending the letter, but it's very important to take away the sort of noise, the political noise, and look at the dry bones of this, because the long-term consequences of a Prime Minister, say Johnson, being able to prorogue Parliament. Proroguing happens every year. It's not an unusual act, but the consequences of this time...
It hasn't happened for 2.5 years.
Well, I was going to say, but this time it's the consequences of it that will be unusual, in that in this most crucial time for Parliament's voice to be shut down, so they can't actually vote on not just if there's a deal or no deal, but actually on allocating resources and finances to sort of cushion a no deal. So there's a huge sway of acts that they'd have to bring to Parliament. And the problem with that is it then sets a precedent that a future Prime Minister can do that. And that is exactly the same as I did in the first case, which is that the long-term effects of this is that it would change the power shift between the Executive Prime Minister and the elected MPs. And that's actually fundamental for us to focus on, and why this is so important.
I mean, what MPs are trying to do today is similar to what you're doing, but it's not the same process, is it?
Well, what they're trying to say is that every 2 weeks they must come back and report on the effects on Northern Ireland of this process going forwards, and that gives them the opportunity to introduce other debates. So they're trying to say, to put this timetable there, but it's not quite the same. It wouldn't necessarily stop proroguing, but it would make it would actually strengthen a case if I were to bring it, and I would be very reluctant. I'm hoping the response to our letter is we would not prorogue Parliament, we think it's beyond our power, and that would be the end of it.
Now, Tom Harwood, do you think proroguing is a live issue?
It certainly is. It's right to keep it on the table. It's not something that I think anyone favours in this whole issue, but it is something that is crucial to keep there on the table as one of those mechanisms that can be used by the executive. We've seen over the last course of the last few months, Remainers in Parliament do unprecedented things, almost launching coups against the executive, putting forward legislation from the backbenches, ramming through legislation in the course of one day. But there are all of these things that have been riding roughshod over our constitution,
but that's partly,
and over precedent.
Because we don't have a government that can command a majority.
Well, the government clearly can command a majority. It's got to deal with the Democratic Unionist Party. And on many Brexit issues...
can't command a majority. I mean, it's been
well, it has. It voted
repeatedly
it passed
the legislation because a lot of its own side won't support it. So in those circumstances, it's perfectly normal, in fact, within the British Constitution, for there to be other parliamentary measures taken.
Well, the reason why the prorogation of Parliament would ensure a no-deal Brexit is because Parliament has actually twice voted for a no-deal Brexit in terms of the European Withdrawal Act that means it's the legal default that we leave at the end of October. The reason why prorogation works is it's the current law that we leave with no deal. That's what MPs have voted for, whether they like it or not.
Now, I mean, Parliament, as you said, does get prorogued before a Queen's speech. Yes. We're going to have a new Prime Minister. He's going to have a new agenda. He's going to have a new cabinet. So what on earth is wrong with doing that and actually starting out again with a government under a new leader?
Well, what we would seek a review on is to say what was the intention. So to say if the intention is to bypass Parliament, then that would have to seek review, because the act itself on its own is not unusual, but the consequences at this time, when we are about at this crucial time to leave, and for Parliament not to have a voice, that is what is, if you look back at the judgment in the Supreme Court judgment in my first case, is that, you know, Parliament has to be part of this process. And Tom is right in saying that Parliament has been involved in this entire process. They voted for the first, the triggering of Article 50. They voted in 2018 for the Withdrawal Act. And they're saying at the end of this process, they need to have the constitutional right and legal right to have a vote at the end of the process as well.
So it's simply continuity of what they voted for?
Well, clearly what we've seen is a lot of MPs riding against what they said to the electorate in 2017. In 2017, when MPs put themselves forward, when they stood on their manifestos, they said that they'd support leaving the European Union. Many said that they'd oppose outright a second referendum.
But none of those manifestos said leaving without a deal. which is
Well,
which is what this issue is
the
about.
The Conservative Party manifesto
Didn't
said that a no deal was
deal.
better than a bad deal.
The
Clearly,
manifesto didn't say that.
The manifesto
didn't.
Throughout the manifesto, they were saying that we need to prepare for the terms of leaving with no deal.
No, the manifesto said the intention was to leave.
Of course, the intention
with an agreement.
Right, but an intention isn't an obligation.
I mean, you can't cite the manifesto on the no deal question. It just doesn't apply.
It clearly has been the intention through this whole time. It still is the intention of. I mean, it's most likely that Boris Johnson will become the Prime Minister in 6 days' time. It's his absolute intention to get a deal. And if the EU are going to be sensible about this, we will get a deal. But it's also right that if the EU do not budge, they will be putting us in a really horrible situation as a country. We don't want to leave with no deal, but it has to be on the table. Well, it's proper to prepare for it, and it's right that we do so if the EU do not grant a single concession.
Sorry, but it is proper that our elected, paid for with our public tax money representatives have the right to talk about how we leave and mitigate any negatives. That is actually what we elect them to do. So to then deny them that voice is actually denying everyone their voice, because we're a representative democracy.
We look at what MPs said during the election. MPs said that they would honour the referendum.
But that's
and so many, and the MPs that you've been working with in your Stop Brexit campaigns.
Actually, I've not worked with any MPs, and I don't have any MPs that I work with, so I'm not part of.
You've appeared on platforms with countless
no,
politicians.
I haven't.
Where? You're running your campaign Best for Britain.
No.
You're running a campaign.
I left Best for Britain the day after the 2017 election. I have not been part of any
You're running Stop
MP.
the Chaos. You're running various. You're running various. You've been involved in so many of these. It's extraordinary.
No, I'm sorry, but
I think. Hang on.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Let her answer.
Sorry, the idea that you're not an anti-Brexit activist.
Answer the allegations you've made, please.
I'm sorry. I'm not part of Best for Britain. I started it for an election. I left the day after. I've not been involved in any other campaigns with any MPs at all. I have a platform that's an information platform called End the Chaos. I have no conversations. I've not spoken to any MPs about this or about my case.
Gina,
I'm not. You have to find evidence.
I think people find this really actually patronising when you.
Well, no, it's called the truth.
When you talk to people and you pretend that you're some impartial voice, you're clearly not an impartial voice.
No, they're two different things. I believe that leaving with no deal will cause us harm.
You believe leaving at all will cause us harm? That's why you've been involved in these organisations to stop us leaving.
I'm sorry. You need to go on record and see, actually, I believe it was on Sky when I said, just after the referendum, that we're all Brexiteers now. But we have to ensure that the process...
Gina, no one believes you.
That's fine. You are entitled to your own views, but not your own facts.
All right, but what about the issue of sovereignty? Because part of Brexit was taking back control, taking back sovereignty. And to some people, it looks rather odd to take back control and then promptly suspend or propose suspending our national parliament.
To more people, it looks rather odd that MPs are trying to prevent control being taken back in the first place. To be voting for and preventing the United Kingdom taking back control over domestic legislation. What MPs are trying to do, and so many of them going against what they said for years and months, MPs saying that we should ignore, basically, that referendum mandate, saying that we should continue to take diktats from Europe.
No, the fact is that the MPs passed the Notification Act in 2017, they passed the Withdrawal Act in 2018, which gave the government Henry VIII powers to prepare our legislative books so that we can smoothly leave the EU. They also, in that act, said that on the day of leaving, we would appeal the 1972 Act. And that was passed by MPs. Right, so to say that they are frustrating it, they're not.
They then delayed it. They voted against the implementation of leaving. That act that they passed...
Job to do.
Sorry, their job is to prevent Brexit. This is so silly.
Their job is to scrutinise and debate and to look at the reports and to do the job that we elect them to do.
Now, Gina, I just do want to ask you a letter to the Times today from man who used to be on the Supreme Court, Jonathan Sumption.
Yes.
Supreme Court ruled in your favour on the whole question of the meaningful vote. He says this particular legal challenge he doesn't think
he's not sure, because his argument is, and actually that's the whole point why we'd go to judicial review, because there are different opinions. There is no legal... Prorogation has never gone to a court to receive a judicial review. And his argument is that under convention, that it shouldn't be, that it's a Privy Council. And we would argue, yes, that's true, but actually it shouldn't get to the stage where it has to go to the Queen. We should actually be asking for judicial review to see if it's within a Prime Minister's powers to use prorogation and their royal prerogative powers in this manner.
But that's about motive.
It's more about...
Prorogation is a technical thing.
It is a technical thing. It is technical. It does happen every year, but it is how it's being used and why it's being used.
And Tom, do you think it is going to come to it? Do you think if Boris Johnson is elected leader, if the European Union behaves as you think it's going to behave, that actually we are going to end up in this situation of trying to get out without a deal and putting Parliament to one side?
Well, it's absolutely right to keep that on the table. And I think that the European Union won't behave in the way that they've behaved over the last 3 years if they genuinely believe we're going to leave without a deal. That's how you ensure the best deal. Constant delay does not make a deal. Deadlines make deals. And that's what this government needs to be focused on. But what I'd ask, Gina, is that why didn't you do any of this legal challenge to any of the Remainers in Parliament who've done things that ride over centuries of precedent? When John Bercow ignored the advice of his senior clerks in accepting amendments that were clearly nothing to do with legislation on hand in order to stop Brexit, why didn't you challenge that?
Because they didn't have anything that was legally able to be challenged. Because actually we have been looking at all the different procedures. And there was a question, I agree with you, about that unusual convention. But then when we spoke to the clerks, actually it wasn't against the law. And that's the thing. It can only be something that is judiciable that you go to court for.
And when's your case going to be in court?
Well, no, I'm hoping we don't have to do it because we will wait and see. We're prepared to go, but we're hoping that we'll have the parliamentarians.
If this vote goes through, would you drop it?
If the courts go through today, then if that's ignored later down the line, then actually that would help our case. But at the moment, I can't see any moment right now why we would progress.
OK, thank you very much indeed. And we are expecting that vote in the Commons on the move to oppose Parliament being suspended in around an hour's time. Of course, we'll have live coverage of that here on Sky News. Back soon.